There we go. Okay, welcome everybody to the empathy class. So like I was saying before I was reminded to record, um, February has been an interesting month. When I was doing predictions for this year, I just remember coming to February and being like, nobody should plan anything in February. I didn't know what was going to happen, but it's interesting how like the universe has really been pulling forward like what we really need and what we really want this month. And just everything's been happening super duper fast. So I thought things are going to accelerate in April, but apparently it's starting now. So I just want to acknowledge like where everybody is energetically coming into this. Because yeah, it's been an exhausting week. So many good things are happening. So going on to empathy. So I put this class together just because I know seeing a huge trend in the increase of empathy and actually all of our psychic skills during COVID. Because what happened is we were all shut in and we like were and everyone was trying to figure out if the world was safe, what was going on. And what that did is it naturally made people connect deeper and connect automatically. And so all the empaths got even more empathic. People who didn't know they had any empathy skills were coming into them because we were trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And so I spent a lot of time with my little videos each day, especially when I was doing that 30 days of theta, of just teaching people how to live as an empath in the COVID world. But some of us have been empaths our whole life. I used to joke that I was an empath because I was in complete denial of my empathic abilities because the way that I perceived my empathy was a little bit different because I had this like separation always. I used to joke that I could see people's emotions but not feel them because I really could just by looking. My gifts also started out very, very visual, right? Like I was seeing things from a very early age. I was seeing ghosts from as long as I think my first memory is of actually seeing the ghost of one of my grandmothers and talking to her and being like super tapped into that world. So I would, and also too, it might have been the reason I called myself an empath and didn't want to acknowledge that I was an empath is because in high school and in college, I would meet people who were like, oh my God, I'm such an empath. I can't be around people like this and like that. And they'd make it into this drama as if being empathic was this horrible curse you had to put up with. And so then on the first 8 times like that I actually even heard that word, it was always tied to people who are being super dramatic about it and being like this was some curse instead of being like this is actually a really amazing gift. Right. And but also just to define empathy. Empathy is just being able to be in tune with the people around you, with the world around you, to be able to perceive whether it's seeing like I did at first, feeling, or kind of knowing what's going on with the world around you. So it's not necessarily just with people. It can be like being in tune with the land, being in tune with animals. There's like many, many different types of empathy. And like I said, it comes in at different ways. I have always been able to just look at someone and kind of know what's going on. Or I remember one time I was working at Dave & Buster's and I was actually assigned to one of the boss's ex-wives sat at my table. And I would walk past her and I just got dumped on me, like all the information about the divorce. It was just like dumped on me exactly how she felt about my boss. So I'm like, hey, can someone else take this table? It's a little bit much. Right. And this was of course before I learned like how to have boundaries around it. Because I know for many, many people, the concept that you can have boundaries on a gift and that you can turn a gift on and off is kind of mind-blowing. But that is the truth. We actually can, with enough practice, choose how and when we actually use these different beliefs. Make sense? So just going back into how people perceive them, like I said, I've always been very, very visual. So I collected my information through my third eye, and sometimes actually with my 2 literal eyes. Because when I see ghosts and things, I can literally see them like they're standing there, and same with some people's emotions. But some people, when they have their empathy, they actually literally feel it in their body. A lot of times you're going to be picking up emotions in the belly area. Some people too also We can feel it on our skin, especially if it's a really, really negative emotion. So some people also perceive it there. I know some people say that empathy is just about that, just about getting emotions through that third chakra, but it can be a full body experience for a lot of us. And it also depends on how you developed it, why you developed it, when you developed it, right? Because for every one of us, every single human being has some sort of psychic abilities. A lot of people shut theirs down when they're young. They shut them down pretty hard. It can be harder to tap into it. But we're all born with like one ability that we kind of have. And then as we learn and grow, we add them on. But what happens is sometimes if our abilities come in outside of whatever the order was that it was intended for us, then it can cause that that ability to be out of balance. And the things that cause you to get your abilities out of balance is some sort of pattern interrupt. For some people, it's like if you do too many psychedelic drugs all at once. Also, trauma can do it, right? Or having, yeah. There's a lot of different reasons why. And it can be complex trauma, or it can be like one sudden traumatic event, which is a little bit different from a near-death experience, just to touch on that a little bit. A lot of times people's first gift will open up during an NDE, and that is because we have this collective consciousness that we're supposed to die and come back or come near to death in order to gain our abilities, because a lot of our ancestors, especially anybody who were practicing shaman, that was how they believed you could open up your gifts. So for a lot of our ancestors, that was the only way. So that's a little bit different. If your beliefs are cracked open by an NDE, that means they're going to open up in the correct order, because the near-death experience was literally the vehicle that you use to access that first gift. That distinction making sense to everyone? As opposed to a trauma, which is different. So a lot of people who feel like they are at the mercy of their empathy oftentimes developed empathy, the sense of knowing what's going on with everyone else, as a form of protection. So there's people who grew up in super, super chaotic households. Maybe they had a mom who had mental issues going on and was unpredictable, and they didn't know what mood they were going to be in. Or maybe they had a dad who drank and they didn't know, like, which parent am I going to have today? Am I going to have the nice, loving parent today, or I'm going to have the angry, yelling parent today? And so in order to figure out who you have to be and modulate your behavior to accompany who that parent was today, then you have to know exactly what they're feeling before they come in the room. So as a form of self-preservation and creating safety, that is one reason why really little kids get super, super empathetic really, really quick. And what happens is you do it by default. Like, you don't even think about it. It's like as soon as you're around any other human being, you're immediately connected to their emotions, and you're always sort of staying there connected, being like, okay, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? So it also creates this hypervigilant. And so those people that I met in the 90s who were like making a big deal out of it, that's obviously what was going on with them, because they didn't know how to just know that they were safe, and they didn't know how to disconnect and how to not automatically connect every time they walked into a room, because as a kid, that was the only way that they stayed safe. Makes sense? So yeah, that's one thing that we want to undo. The other reason people develop empathy is because it's just what they were going to develop next. And like I said, also too, during COVID, everyone's sense of empathy increased enormously. How many of you guys felt a shift when we're sitting here trying to figure out what's going on in the world? Mine shifted pretty deeply. So just to understand the flow of my personal flow of empathy, first of all, I was in denial of it because I had a bad attitude towards it. But I had other gifts and worked on it. And then all of a sudden, I'm working on someone in a session, and I can literally feel in my own body a shadow of what's going on in them. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of pain in your right hip. But I would feel it in an interesting way. It was never as painful as they had it in their body. It was like a shadow of it. And it was beautiful because as we did the work, as we cleared beliefs, as we brought in the healings, I would literally feel in my own body the whole energy of their pain shift. So it actually took the place of my seeing, because it started out really, really visually. And then eventually I came to the place, and I'm still very visual, but when I'm working on the human body now, I don't need to check and look as much because I can feel it shifting. So that's where it can be. And that only happens when I'm in a session and when I'm on the clock, which is much nicer than how it was before of having that hypervigilance. So how do we get from connecting automatically all the time and feeling overwhelmed to everyone's emotions and to just being able to literally turn it on and turn it off in a whim? So it does take work. There's a few different components. First of all, you need to learn what a boundary is. Then it's good to do a lot of belief work so your body knows that it's safe to change how you relate to other humans. And then also practice, right? So for setting boundaries, what'll happen is, because your energy is always open to everyone all the time, and you're always getting all that information in, you can sometimes step into the habit of not having good boundaries with the people around you, because you're like, I have to be boundaryless in order to stay safe. Makes sense. So literally just practicing, like feeling into your boundaries and setting your boundaries, is one thing that's really, really going to help. So we're going to do a practice right now to actually help you understand what a boundary can be. And this is really, really simple. So one boundary that we have is understanding where you end and the world begins, or where your feelings end and someone else's feelings begin. Right? So this is really, really simple. If you have long sleeves, you're going to want to roll them up a little bit so you have some bare skin, or take off your jacket. Like I said, this is so simple, and you can do this anytime. But if you do this a few times, you're really going to be able to understand what is you, right? Because if you spend all that time collapsing to everyone else, sometimes you lose a sense of our own identity, like who am I and who's that other person? So we're going to do, it's going to look kind of silly, is I want you to take and just wave your arms around a bunch. Just wave, 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 moving your arms. Really feel the air moving on your arms, just feeling it, just loving it. You're like, oh my gosh, there's so much wind. Feeling the air on the hairs on your arm. And then what you're going to do is you're going to come to stillness, resting your arms, closing your eyes. And now I want you to just really tune into all the molecules in the air as they're hitting your skin, and just be present with that. Feeling the difference between your arms, like your body and the air around you. And just knowing that you're allowed to exist in the air without always having to be part of it. All right. Oh. And then opening your eyes and coming back into awareness. Oh. So what did we feel in that? Was anybody able to feel the difference and like understand like the boundaries of your own self? Because I know for some people, literally having boundaries is such a revelation, right? Because we're so used to, and that's the other contradiction or conflicting thing that we want to get into is like through Theta and through a lot of the practices, we do have this desire to be at one with the whole universe, but at one with the whole universe with a sense of identity and boundaries. Does that make sense? So there is this catch-22 where, first of all, if we are without boundaries, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to learn that I am a separate being, separate from, the land. I am separate from other humans, and learn to come into allowing yourself to exist in your own space. And then once we build all that knowingness up, then we're going to work towards, so I'm all this, I have boundaries, I'm respected, and I'm now one with the universe again. Does that make sense? So it's sort of like resetting. Because for some people, just going straight from I've never had any boundaries, I have to be connected to everything to be safe, to I am one with the universe, can feel a little unsafe. And that may be why some people have a little bit of a negative reaction coming out of seminars that are trained to get you closer to that oneness. Because if the oneness that you experienced as a child to keep yourself safe was like damaging to yourself and felt like it was hurting you because you have everyone else's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and depression and sadness and anger in your body, then why would you want to be at one with the universe if you feel like you're going to be? And that's really when empathy takes off, is when you have those boundaries and you can filter things in and only take in the good parts and give back everyone else accountability and responsibility for their own negative emotions. And that's a really beautiful kind of oneness.